Hey everyone, it's Mike Henry with Follower of One, and today my guest is Tom Carlson with ECatalyst. Tom, would you tell everybody hi?
Hi, everybody.
So tell us a little bit about you and how you got involved with ECatalyst.
Okay, so I spent about 10 years in the Middle East doing business. So I went over there as working with a American engineering firm. We were doing atmospheric water generation of all things. It was a really fun time in a lot of ways, but I also felt like the business didn't go quite as well as I would have liked.
Yeah,
We did probably have started another 4 or 5 businesses over the course of that time. I really love the process of entrepreneurship. I especially love it as a follower of Christ, of really being able to engage people in business, especially overseas, and in context where that really becomes the core of sort of what the interaction is. We're
yeah,
talking about identity level stuff and livelihood and who
yeah.
am I as a person and all of those kinds of things. So we came back in 2015. I had some other thoughts of doing some other things, but wound up staying in the U.S. Got involved with a bit of community development kinds of things.
Mhm.
So trying to help communities work together to develop um, medical or educational or these other
Yes.
kinds of sort of problem solving kind of things. But part of what I always struggled with those particular organizations was, but yeah, but what about business? Why? I mean, of all the things that you could do that would really transform a economy and transform a society and give ownership to the people that are there, help them start a business. If you can help them start a
Mhm.
business, then they own that solution. They
Yes.
they want to make that happen. And if you can give people that kind of hope that um, that if I have an idea, I could actually start a business, I could do it, then you've really empowered them in a way that you just can't do by digging them a well or doing other kinds of charitable kind of things.
Yeah.
Um, I found a guy about 2 or 3 years ago who was doing entrepreneurial ecosystems. I was really excited about what they were doing. They were doing it on a for-profit level. Um, Tremendous organization, lots of really, really good training. But they were also, because they were doing it as a for-profit, they were doing mostly training. So we'd go over, we'd do 4 or 5 days. It was all on an
Yes.
MIT model for entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And again, fantastic training. But then I would do a lot of the follow-up calls, and I'd call people up and say, okay, so what are you doing? And they're like, I don't know, we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I started proposing, I feel like what we really need to do is we need to have a really robust follow-up program. And B, that I feel like if we do it as a for-profit, then really the training becomes the central piece. And
Yes.
I feel like we need to, if we do it as a nonprofit, then we can really pour whatever we need to into the process to really make the ecosystem work.
Mhm.
And we spent probably 7 or 8 months working through that proposal. Last summer, the parent company decided they didn't want to have a nonprofit in their network, um, which was fine. But I realized that I really do. I really wanted to do this. This is what I
Yeah.
feel like is going to change communities. And so we branched off at that time amicably and said, this is really where we want to go. And so I started eCatalyst primarily for that reason, that we want to help try to create entrepreneurial ecosystems in the developing world. And that's
Yeah.
our main focus.
So talk about that a little bit. So explain the whole idea about ecosystems.
Okay. Well, an ecosystem is, in a lot of ways, it's the network, it's the environment that allows something to thrive. So if
Mhm.
you think about a frog in a pond, a frog needs all sorts of things. He needs food, he needs water, he needs sunlight, he needs air, he needs predators. Predators force him to be creative and think about places to
Mhm.
hide and how to adapt to his environment. He needs other frogs. So all of that kind of things that are around him are part of what makes that frog able to survive.
Yeah.
Um, and entrepreneurs need the same thing. Entrepreneurs need other entrepreneurs. They need resources. They need capital. They need to understand how to start a business. They need competition because it forces them to be an innovative and to think differently about
Mhm.
business. It keeps them sharp. They need ways to be able to manage money and support organizations. And more than anything else, they really just need, you know, most of the time, if a person has an idea, and this is true in America, it's true anywhere in the developing world, lots of people have ideas. Ideas are everywhere.
Hmm.
The reason people don't start businesses is usually because they don't know how, or even if they do know how, they don't know where they're going to find all the resources that they need. And
Yeah.
even if they do know how and they know where they're going to find the resources, they feel like they're all by themselves.
Yeah.
So if you can help bring a community around entrepreneurs where they have the knowledge resources they need, they have access to the capital and the banking and the marketing and all the other kind of tools that they're going to need, and they have each other, then you start having this place where people walking down the street think, I've got an idea, and those guys, they know what they're doing. I'll go join them. So that's what, when we talk about setting up an entrepreneur ecosystem, we're talking about setting up networks and communities that make that possible for a density of opportunity in a community. And when you do that in the developing world, you start changing economies.
Exactly. And when you and I spoke about this the first time, my mind started racing around the idea of how this applies even to the networks of people that we form online with
Sure.
our LinkedIn profile, right? Or whatever. I mean, every kind of a connection, the network that we are in becomes this ecosystem, if you will. It
Mm-hmm.
propels certain things to happen. It works in a geography, and this works in the States, right? This is exactly
Mm-hmm.
what happens in the
Mm-hmm.
States domestically, but
Yep.
you also want to do it overseas, correct?
Yes, I really, and again, to clarify too, ecosystem, the word ecosystem can mean all sorts of different
Yeah.
things, especially when you're talking about it metaphorically like we are. It can mean those kind of connections on LinkedIn, or people can talk about, I was talking with the navigators a little while ago, and they were talking about their navigator ecosystem, which they mean a
Mhm.
global network of other people. The when Just to clarify what we're talking about, we're really talking about the local group of people or the local environment around an entrepreneur that's really going to make or break that entrepreneur's business.
Correct.
We do tend to talk more geographically. I'm not saying you can't talk about it any other way. I'm saying that's the way we're talking about it.
Agreed.
But yes, I feel like there's a lot of places. Kaufman Foundation is doing some fantastic work here. Forwarding Cities in BIA. There's a bunch of organizations in the U.S. that are focused on ecosystems, on entrepreneurial ecosystems. There's not that really happening in a lot of the other places in the world, and even the places that are like Endeavor, and there's some others that are talking ecosystem language. A lot of times they're either working with just the very elite. In other words, they're helping give money to the best of the best, or they're doing some kind of entrepreneurial training and sort of hoping that networks form out of it.
Yeah.
Neither of those things are wrong. I think you know, micro enterprise is all great stuff, but what we really want to do is be intentional about creating the community that teaches itself. We want to give the tools, but we want to support their leaders, push up from the bottom, as it were, so that they're the ones in charge. They're the ones that are leading. We're giving them the tools and the resources and the framework so that they can then take that on their own, and we can move on someplace else.
Yeah. And so you're actively planning and strategizing how you do this in communities, and your goal is to do this in the developing world.
Yep,
And you talk about this for people who are interested. The website is ecatalyst.org,
that's right.
and we will have connection information in the body of this article or
Okay.
online. You'll be able to check it out in the podcast show notes. Where are some of the places that you'd like to go? What are some of the things, the areas that you believe will be important?
I think I feel like this could happen in so many different parts of the world. There are some places where more of it is happening than others, but my focus, again, I spent 10 years in the Middle East. I speak Arabic, so there's a chunk of my heart that still resides in the Middle East
Yeah.
there. So there's a lot of me that wants to go back into that space. For right now, though, one of the things that we've decided that we're going to do before we go into any place is having a solid on the ground presence of leaders and of people that are really engaged this process. So we don't even want to go in there until that's happening. Because otherwise, we're coming in and we're trying to make it happen. And then as soon as we leave, it's just going to fall apart. So it needs to start with the leadership on the ground, and then we can come in and support them by helping them with their programming and everything else. So right now we've got a couple different spots in Rwanda that we're really looking at. We've got a spot or two in India. I need to hesitate right now to say exactly where those are. Nepal is a possibility. There's a couple of places in the Middle East also that we want to go to. Another one that's actually really interesting is, and we may even start out here, is in Hamtramck, Michigan. If you've ever been to Hamtramck, it's a largely immigrant population. It's almost entirely, it's like 41% foreign born. So that's the first generation. And so then the second and third generation make up a huge chunk of the rest of the population there. And if you walk down the street, there's a lot of signs that aren't even in English. They're not even trying to reach out to necessarily to non-immigrants, as it were. So it's a really close-knit community. A lot of Yemeni, a lot of Bangladeshi, a lot of Afghani, a lot of Lebanese. And so there's a couple of groups that are up there that would really like to see this happen as well. So we've talked to them about the possibility of trying to do something there, primarily as a prototype for us, of being able to get up there, to give it a really, to give it a good shot, to bring some of the other organizations around to help them out. But again, because so much is already happening in the US, we don't feel like those areas need us nearly as much as a place like Rwanda, especially out in the outside of the capital city and in places in India and in the Middle East.
Yeah, and you talked about this a little bit, but I want to spend some more energy focusing on it.
Okay.
Your goal is to create the ecosystem itself, right? So that it sustains the businesses that are there and creates an environment for new ones. It's as opposed to just making a microloan of some kind and trying to help a single individual in a particular city start a business.
Yes. Yes, we are a nonprofit, but one of the things that I tell people, in fact, I was on the phone to India this morning, and the team is there. We're talking about it, and I said, listen, I have to be very, very clear. We don't bring money in. We're not bringing money in, because as soon as we bring money in, there's an expectation that we're going to keep bringing money in. And so one of the things we want to do from the very, very beginning is set up a place where they can sustain this on their own long after we leave. And if we start out doing that in a way that they start looking to us for the resources, it's never really going to take off. We want them to be able to start out with the capacity on the ground to be able to do it. We are willing to bring in investment later on. We want to start with local investors, but sometimes local investment, there's not enough investment for all of the needs that companies that develop, especially growth-oriented companies, have. So we want to be able to bring in outside investments, and there's a number of organizations, NCF and Impact Foundation, and there's a number of others that are also doing this kind of work. But that is going to be going to specific companies, and it's going to be going primarily in debt instruments. So it would be something that they would be paying back. But still, that's a different kind of, it's not, they've already developed something that's successful at that point. And now we're just helping infuse it with some capital that they can be able to move forward and then pay that capital back off. So again, that I don't think is creating dependency the same way that we would be if we were coming in and bringing money in. So that's just an example. One of the ways that when we do this, we want to have everything focused on them being able to sustain whatever the reality is there. So having the solid presence on the ground, not bringing money in, creating the resources, having them take over almost as soon as we bring it in, bringing in some content. We want them to learn it and then be able to do it from there on out. And so that way we can pull out, and that they can sustain that reality on the ground.
Yeah. Now, one other thing that you and I talked about, and I want to make sure we discuss. So ECatalyst and what you're trying to accomplish, it's not specifically for Christians, right? It's
No, not at all.
designed to create the ecosystem in a for-profit model in a community. It's an economic effort, right?
Yes, absolutely. And just to clarify that last point, we are a nonprofit because we don't want the ecosystems to have to sustain us. We are looking
Hmm.
for support on this side to be able to go out and do this. But we want what we create to be sustainable on its own. We just don't want them to have to sustain us as well. But yeah, as far as not working with exclusively Christians, yeah, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that ecosystems in general, if you think about the frog in the pond again, if you say, well, let's put a big fence around it and then we'll sort of make the ecosystem safe, it's not kind of ceased to be an ecosystem. An ecosystem by its nature has to be an open network. And so that's one of the reasons that we don't want to be in a place where we're only going to work with this people group, or we're only going to work with Christians, or we're only going to work with any other religious group for that matter. Now, I am myself a Christian, and I do feel very strongly about my Christianity and walking this out. I mean, my faith is informing absolutely everything that I'm doing with this. And I even believe that one of the things that ecosystems do is it builds relationships. And when you bring Christians in there, I think Christians can talk about their faith in a context like that. But that's not why we're doing it. We're doing this because we want to be literally a blessing to the world. As a Christian, again, this is part of what informs my process is, you think about Jeremiah 29:7, that there's this place where the exiles were about to go into Babylon. And Jeremiah is saying, look, you're going. You don't have a choice at this point.
Right.
But when you get there, their prosperity is your prosperity. So pray for the peace of the land. Be a
Yes.
blessing to that place. Take daughters for your sons in marriage. Give your daughters away to sons for their marriage. The way we help as believers, or even as non-believers, the way we help bless other people changes that environment. And we need to be doing that regardless of whether anybody is Christian or non-Christian or anything else. We need to be a blessing. And so ECatalyst, really, we're not a Christian organization in that regard. We are trying to be an organization that is a blessing, that is a benefit to marketplaces, no matter where we go.
Understood. And for my listeners, I mean, if you have questions about that, I would encourage you to connect with Tom and ask him about it. We'll have links to his connection information in the body as well, and you can discuss it more. I think the goal, right, the flourishing of a community must involve Christ followers, or it's not truly flourishing, but it's not dependent exclusively on Christ followers.
Sure. And I think, and again, I think that as Christ followers, we ought to really be in a place where we want everybody to flourish.
Yeah.
Our calling, enemy, friend, anything,
Yes.
our calling biblically is to love people. And
Yes.
what better way to love them but to help them set up their own business, create their own ownership, and to begin to flourish economically. That's a great way to love them. If they become a Christian, wonderful. If they don't, we don't have an excuse now to say, oh well, we're going to stop helping you now. Our love for them needs to be love, and love doesn't stop just because somebody refuses a message that we might want to bring to them.
Yeah. So speaking of all of this, how did you become a Christian?
I become a Christian. I
Mhm.
became a Christian fairly early on. I was in an Episcopal church. My family was Episcopalians, and I'm actually an Anglican now. I'm still in the Anglican church, and I love that. It's a for evangelicals out there, we're a very evangelical Anglican church, but this Episcopal church is not necessarily evangelical, but there was a 8th grade Sunday school teacher that knew the Lord well, and I think he was there to win hearts, and he won mine. And
Very cool.
he discipled me all the way through high school, and I think early on, I really felt like, if this stuff is real, then I've got to find a way to uh, make my faith real in the world. And part of that, I
Yes.
think, is really helping people that need help. Originally, I thought I was going to the poor, and I took a trip to Haiti when I was in college and got there and realized, who am I? What am I doing here that I'm actually of benefit to them? Just the color
Yes.
of my skin, the economics of my background, none of that really helps the poor. I mean, I can make good friendships, but that's not helping the poor. I think part of what we're trying to do here is really trying to figure out this is not about who we are. This is about who Christ is, and this is about really helping communities develop something that genuinely is of benefit. And that's part of what I love about this process is this feels to me like some of that calling that I had way back of trying to be of a real benefit to the world, to the developing world particularly.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. And so, as a listener, again, I want to challenge you. If you're interested in this idea or would like to know more about it, reach out to Tom. And you can check out his website at ECatalyst.org. And we will have his contact information available as well. I'm just excited at what's going on. And so, as you are figuring out how you lived your faith out in the world,
Mhm.
what's, as kind of one last thing I like to try and ask everybody, what tips would you give to marketplace Christians who are trying to figure that out, who are members of Follower of One or listening to this podcast?
Well, again, I feel like it's so easy as Christians in America, and I hear a lot of people talking about this too, that we tend to silo our faith off as one part of our lives, and our work is a different part of our lives. We're Christians on Sunday, and we're basically Christians the rest of the time, but really we do the Christian thing on Sunday and we do
Yeah.
everything else other times. I feel like if we're going to be if we're going to really be followers of Christ, we need to do that through everything else that we're doing.
Yes.
I see this as, especially in a lot of places in the rest of the world when people are engaging uh, Christian work, especially when people are new Christians. There's this
Hmm.
idea that, well, if I want to be a real Christian, I have to go into ministry.
Yeah.
And part of what I feel like we all need to hear is Jesus came for us to be uh, to live out the gospel in our context as it is, and that includes work, it includes social life, it includes home life, it includes everything. We don't get to be Christians in one place and then not Christians someplace else, or more Christian in one place than less Christian in another.
Yes.
It has to flow through everything, and that means blessing people. That means loving people. And again, we don't have we don't have the option of calling certain people enemies.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
right.
when Jesus said, "Love your enemies," he was doing that tongue in cheek. He was saying, "Yeah, even when you call them enemies, you still need to love them." And that means really going out and finding those people that are hard, people that
Yes.
that are difficult, and finding ways to really bless them. Not just love them in some kind of emotional, petty something, but to find a way to genuinely, substantially bless their lives.
I agree. I don't think we have to look very hard for those people. I think what we have to do is focus and concentrate not to look past them and, select and choose the people. Uh, that's you and I talked about this a little bit too, right? I always thought my job Monday through Saturday was to stay out of trouble. And I didn't like that. I just didn't think that was a very high calling as a believer. I felt like God had a bigger work for me to do than to just not don't break anything,
Right,
you know?
right. Yes.
So, well, I'm excited about your ministry. I'm excited about the business, ecatalyst.org. I'm excited about the idea of these ecosystems and the possibilities of getting them started. What would help you if I'm a listener of this show today? Well, how can I help you?
Well, I mean, obviously, your donations are always welcome, or financial funding. The part of that process for us is just a matter of making sure that we're not being a burden to anybody else or to any other ecosystem. When we set those things up, we want them to be sustainable, and we don't want to be in any way a drain on them. Which means that we need to find ways to fund here. But I think the other thing that I feel like where my heart is that as believers in the marketplace, I think that there is a great process that I think you're following, Mike, and that others that you've even introduced me to are really trying to help get believers in the marketplace to live out their faith in the marketplace. One thing that I would challenge listeners here even farther is think about people beyond your marketplace. Think about the believers in other marketplaces, other places in the world. Are there ways that we can be a blessing not just to the people around us immediately, but to places all the way across the world? There is a real need for business people to be able to help business people overseas. And I would say particularly Christian business, believing business people here, you've got a motivation. You've got a call to love and to be able to take your expertise and your skills and your capacity and be able to have real significant contributions to places overseas, to developing areas, to places where they don't know about Christianity. All of these things. You as business people, you are ministers. We're all ministers,
Yes.
and that's got to be core to everything that we do. And so I just challenge you to lift your eyes up and see the hills beyond the ones that are right in front of you, and see what else is out there. And if there's ways that we can help you do that, I'd love to make that happen. If there's other places that have those opportunities, it's not just about giving money though. It can't just be about giving money. We fall into that trap. We want to just give out money because it's easy. It releases us from a certain level of guilt. But it's got to be more than that. It's got to mean giving of your life, getting involved, praying, if nothing else, and then really, really trying to find ways that businesses overseas can benefit from who you are.
Yeah. Great way to say it. And so if this is bugging you, or if this kind of strikes a chord with you, reach out to Tom or reach out to me. And, we want to help you respond to whatever God's telling you to do as you hear these podcasts and get these ideas. I'm grateful, Tom, for what you've done with ECatalyst and how that will continue to grow and make a difference. And I'm excited to see what happens. So thank you very much for being a part of this.
You're very welcome. It's been a great honor, and thank you so much for giving this opportunity. I love what you're doing. I love what Power of One is doing, and I just pray that God will continue to bless you and your ministry as well.
Thanks. Everyone, thank you for listening to Follower of One. Go check us out as well at followerofone.org, but definitely make sure that you get in touch with Thomas. Talk to you later.